Hey, this is Rick, aka Concrete River. Trying to put some lipstick on this old pig. Upgrade the video setup. We'll see how it works out. This is like my fourth attempt at shooting this video, so if it's terrible at this point, I'm probably just gonna toss it and go back to a webcam. But want to try to boost the production quality a little bit. So expect lots of like spinning logos, loud dubstep music. I'm trying really hard to look cool at this point, so anything I can do should, help. So, um, so today I wanted to cover some super concentrates flavors. I have four of the super concentrates fruits that I picked up off Bowl City Flavors at Dave ID10T's suggestion, with my big list of what should Concrete River review next. So, today I have super concentrate raspberry, pineapple, tropic, and mandarin, and all of those are mixed at 2%. So I'd like to lie and say this is my first test, but as I've said before, I've tried this video like 4 times. So now I can do fun things like comment on how well they're holding flavor, stuff like that. So, and I've got 4 separate setups for it, which was a big problem. Turns out these flavors really like to stack on top of each other. So I'm super prepared now. Starting off with the super concentrate raspberry at 2%. See, this is where I fake like a whole bunch of super thoughtful faces. Like, this is the first time I've tasted this. But I've gotten to be unfortunately familiar with these so far. Okay. So I'm usually a huge fan of raspberry flavors. I can't taste strawberries to save my life. I sort of decided early on, hey, I'll just start subbing in raspberry flavors. And there are quite a few good raspberry flavors. Well, there's at least 3. 2 good raspberry flavors, and 1 decent raspberry flavor. I really like Innoware's Shisha Raspberry. I like Flavor Arts, just normal barrel, their raspberry. And then I respect some of the applications of Innoware Raspberry Melina, too. This isn't going to be replacing any of those for me. It's a very candied raspberry flavor. It has like this weird kind of like powdery sweetness to it. Like, it's almost a little bit dry and a little bit floral, but it's not like a realistic berry taste at all. It's like definitely like a sort of raspberry hard candy kind of flavor. I'm not getting anything like juicy or jammy out of it. It's just a very flat, sweet candy raspberry. It doesn't taste like TFA's sweet raspberry with that weird like ketchup note in there. So, I mean, that's cool. It might be useful as sort of a substitute for that kind of candy raspberry. And, when I say like floral, it isn't necessarily like actually floral, like smelling flowers. It's kind of that like artificial chemical sort of floral note, that sort of high perfumey note that doesn't really have a lot of like body or sort of interest to it. It just tastes a little bit almost vaguely astringent and weird. But at 2%, it's a very sort of full, bright, candied flavor, which seems to be a trend with some of these. We'll get into the rest of them, but that's the big spoiler alert here. They all taste like candy flavors, but yeah, it's definitely sweet. Like I said, it has that kind of like weird powdery sweetness, but it's a fairly realistic like powdery sugary sweetness as opposed to like a clear sucralose hit or like an artificial sweetener. So it's like a real sugar sweetened fake raspberry flavor, if that's not too complicated. But yeah, I mean, it's not bad. It's not something I'm going to be reaching for a whole bunch. But if you're looking for like a candy berry flavor, um, you could definitely go worse. It doesn't quite go full to the like mixed berry Tums cough drop kind of gnarly flavor. It's not super identifiable as a raspberry, but it's also, not just straight mixed berries. So, I mean, it's not bad. See, the big trick is whether or not I'm going to start doing stuff like taking out the palate cleansing in between the flavors. Like, because I have an editing program now and shit. So, um, next we have super concentrate pineapple. So, continuing on the whole candy thing with these flavors, this tastes pretty much spot on to white gummy bears, like the Haribo white gummy bears. Because if you're not buying Haribo gummy bears, you're fucking up. Um, this one's less powdery than the raspberry. It's a very sort of deep, sugary sweetness, almost a little bit of like darker, kind of more. Oh, caramel's probably overstating the case, but it definitely tastes like there's a real sugar sweetness behind it. Sort of flat candy flavor to it. Yeah, I mean, white gummy bears isn't a bad thing. If you're looking for a white gummy bear flavor instead of like fucking around with pineapples and dragon fruits, you could probably just go ahead and grab this one and call it good. Maybe throw some of, I don't know, Flavora's candy roll in it at low percentages if you want just a little bit of gummy texture, or uh, higher percentages if you want to go like full pineapple pixie sticks, which doesn't really sound like a bad thing. Yeah, it's not bad. It's really sweet though, which I guess kind of fits that candy pineapple profile. So this one I can see reaching for a little bit more, if nothing else, because like candy pineapple is a little bit more attractive of a profile for me than like candy raspberry, but that's all probably personal taste. And again, that was tested at 2%. Um, so yeah, 2% seems like a pretty good starting point for some of these flavors. They're definitely sort of heavy and sweet, but with those kind of flavors, you don't necessarily want a lot of nuance if you're using them. So, I mean, just based on this limited testing, and I'll go back and do like actual concentration testing for all of them on like my full on Reddit reviews and stuff. But uh, based on this, I'd probably use them around 2-3% as like a primary candy flavor, and then sort of build around them. Uh, so next we have tropical, which is usually kind of a bad sign. Like I usually when they don't specify the fruit you're supposed to be tasting, it just kind of tastes like a big mess. And I'm sure you could argue this, and it probably is technically a fruit blend. What I'm getting more than anything else, I'm getting a lot of pineapple. Though some of that might be sort of left on my palate, but I've tried it in a different order and still got a decent amount of pineapple out of it. It's that same kind of like white gummy bear pineapple, though. It's pretty familiar from that super concentrate pineapple, but I'm also getting a whole lot of papaya, which is nice. It's like a candy papaya flavor. Again, not super realistic. And that pineapple kind of fits in with the papaya. It just kind of interlocks, and I get like it's a pretty identifiable papaya. Uh, if you've had like the fancy tropical fruit cups, It's kind of like a papaya, like soaked in syrup, or like almost a papaya nectar or something like that. Definitely on the candy side, though. I mean, you'd easily take this into a papaya, like a papaya gummy or a papaya candy, or hell, if you want something sweeter, throw it in with some creams and make yourself a papaya milkshake. If you repeat the word papaya multiple times on camera, it starts to sound really weird. So that's a pro tip right there. This one seems like it's maybe a little bit less sweet than the pineapple, and especially the raspberry, which is kind of good. Gives you a little bit more flexibility in how to use it. You could probably throw it on top of a whole bunch of other tropical fruits. Should blend well with damn near any of them. I can't really think of too many fruits off the bat that this wouldn't go well with. Uh, I don't know. I don't really want anything floral in here, so maybe more realistic berries would be out. And I'm not necessarily like digging this with like an apple or anything, but your usual suspects with tropical. You've got pineapples, mangoes, guava, all that other nonsense. I think this would go pretty well with. Maybe like a sweeter lime, like an Aware's lime. But yeah, I think that's definitely my favorite of the batch. So, last, but yeah, I'm gonna say the raspberries at least. So, last but not least, we have the Mandarin. And this one's a little bit interesting. Um, it doesn't break really far from that candy Mandarin flavor, but this one feels like it's maybe just a touch more realistic. There's like a hint of earthiness in here, which doesn't have like that accompanying like citrus zest peel note to it, so the earthiness is a little bit weird by itself. It kind of tastes like you somehow managed to candy a full mandarin slice with some of that white pith stuff hanging out on the outside. And yeah, it's still on the sweet side, but there's a little bit more nuance. So I'd say it's a little bit sweeter, a little bit less complex than like Flavor Arts Mandarin. This definitely like veers closer to like Capella's Sweet Tangerine, where it's that kind of like tang flavor. Like the powdered drink, like you put like a little bit too much of that tang mix in there. It's getting like a little bit chalky. This one has a little bit of harshness to it, but honestly, it doesn't feel as harsh as Flavor Arts Mandarin, and not even as harsh as Capella's Sweet Tangerine. And while Sweet Tangerine from Capella definitely has some sweetness to it, this feels a little bit less artificial. That sweetness note actually comes a little bit closer to like a sugar syrup as opposed to like that sort of vague artificial sweetener taste that you get with a lot of the Capella sweet line. Yeah, it's not bad. I could definitely see myself reaching for this one if I want that candy mandarin flavor. It's really not a bad flavor. You mix it with other citruses. You could go the tropical route. It seems like it'd be fairly versatile. You might even be able to use it for like creamsicles and all that other nonsense. Like, seems like a pretty good citrus to go ahead and start blending with dairies, which can be kind of tricky. Just because of the zest note. So this doesn't have that zest. So yeah, I could definitely see mixing it with creams. I feel like if the cream is like too buttery though, or like has too much like dairy to it, the sweetness here is going to get kind of weird. Like these are pretty heavily sweet flavors, and you end up mixing that with like dairy, like TPA's dairy milk, or hell, even Flavor Arts fresh cream. Those dairy notes and like that kind of raw sweetness end up getting a little bit weird together. But yeah, it's definitely not bad. So out of this roundup, I'd probably put the tropical just right in the top spot, just because that papaya flavor is actually pretty good and pretty interesting. Um, the pineapple is probably my second, straight on white gummy bears. The third would be that Mandarin, just because I think it'd be fairly versatile as a sweet citrus blender. And I just wasn't really digging the raspberry, which is fine. I have plenty of raspberries, but anytime I see raspberry, I get a little bit excited. So, it's its own special letdown. In terms of, so these have all been steeped for 7 days now. I started testing on day 3 with these. I told you this has been a very long, torturous process. It does feel like they're fading out quite a bit. They seemed a little bit brighter before a steep, and they were slightly harsher before the steep, but they were also quite a bit brighter. And I feel like with those candy flavors, the thing that really differentiates a decent candy flavor from a good candy flavor is if you can go ahead and get all that sweetness and that brightness at the same time. So, I mean, that's a little bit of a bummer. I think these are going to be better concentrates to use for recipes that aren't steeping very long and that you're not going through, that you're not sitting on a shelf for 6 months. I would make smaller quantities of mixes with these and just sort of burn through them and mix more when you're done. Maybe make yourself up like a fancy flavor base and just mix it on the fly every 3-4 days. Um, but yeah, that these have been my first experience with super concentrate stuff, and if the rest of their fruits are anything like this, it seems like they're tending towards really identifiable candy flavors, which isn't a bad thing, but it's good to know what you're getting into. There's not a whole lot of realism here. So I picked these up off of Bull City Flavors. They're sold there as super concentrates. I also know that they're sold as vaping zone flavors. There's some speculation that these are the same flavors that they're using for the Flavor Express line at ECX, but that hasn't been confirmed by anybody. So that's kind of a crapshoot. That'd be a fun way to move this testing forward to figure out, if we could actually nail down which Chinese supplier all this rebranded stuff's coming from. But yeah, overall, not bad. So thank you for watching this. It's a fairly good chance that I'll get down to edit this and something will have fucked up. But assuming this all goes well and I get it put together, thank you for watching.